Joining us now is former Texas Congressman and Republican presidential candidate Dr. Ron Paul. Congressman, the president is set to hold, as Blake just mentioned, first full cabinet meeting today. Do you think this administration will now be able to move forward on the agenda that Americans want? It's the reason they voted for him.
Well, it's not likely, but let's just hope they move forward on the right things, because everything they say is not exactly going to solve all our problem. I don't happen to believe that public works projects is the way to get more jobs. You might get more jobs, but they won't be the same as if you got more jobs in the private sector, because governments tend to make a lot of mistakes. So I think the obstacles are so great, and a lot of people don't recognize the obstacle being really debt. And when you have a lot of debt, it's hard to spend money. So if you come up with $1 trillion for the military and $1 trillion for public works and repairing highways, where's the money going to come from? And this has an effect on marketplaces eventually, because when you look at how much debt is out there, whether it's automobile debt or college debt, personal debt, even housing debt right now, I mean, there's a lot of problems there. So that's why I think they're stymied, because the fundamentals don't change. Yes, you can tinker and say, we'll create these jobs, but the truth is if you're dependent on government creating the jobs, there's something wrong with the plan.
Well, Congressman, I'm going to push back on that in terms of at least the infrastructure plan, and you call it public works. Come on, I know that means you mean to evoke FDR's programs of the Depression.
Yeah, I do.
But that's why you say it. But the $1 trillion is not going to be. Actually, a minority of it would be government money under the way the plan is laid out now. That the Trump administration would get to that $1 trillion largely in part from funding through private investors. And the money is indeed out there. There was $59 billion raised just last year in private infrastructure funds. Their goal is to ease the permitting process, ease regulations, to get that money invested in projects alongside the government.
Yeah, I think the easing of the regulation is very good, and that's getting out of the way and getting our house in order. But this whole thing of partnerships that bothers libertarians, because partnership of big businesses and big banks and government isn't exactly what a free society is all about. That's not what a republic is about, and it leads to corporatism, because then only favored people get to do the dealing. So I don't like partnership. I want an environment where people can go about and be competitive and produce the things that are necessary. But saying that we're going to have big government financing and big business financing, there's a lot of shortcomings with that plan.
Dr. Paul, Mike Block here. You raised some very valid concerns about debt levels, and it's something that people worry about, except, I don't want to turn this into a discussion on the bond market, but bond yields are not reflecting a lot of concern about all this spending that you're talking about. The capital markets have this wrong? Is there something else going on here?
Yeah, I think they do, and I'm not an investor, but just from an economic viewpoint, I do. I think it's sort of like a week or so ago, you might have said tech stocks were a good investment, and things happen in a flash, and bond markets can happen that way too, because all countries are in debt. And you know, we have the European problem where you have Greece and Italy and Spain having problems, but you're going to have something pop up, and it's going to be very, very devastating. But if you look at prices, when prices go high, when you have inflation, it's dangerous. So when you're saying the bonds are pretty comfortable, you're saying that there's euphoria in the bond market. Prices are very, very high, and I think it's sort of reminds
but I've been talking about that, Congressman. I've been talking about that since 2009, and I'll admit it, I've been dead wrong. Mitch, you got a question for the Congressman?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. What you can't predict is timing.
Yeah, maybe I'll be right when I'm sleeping in the dirt.
Be right.
Maybe I'll be right when I'm sleeping in the dirt. Congressman, I want Mitch to get a question in for you.
Congressman,
okay.
When you look at the agenda with so few days really left in session, where are the priorities? And is tax reform going to sort of fall by the wayside and become something where we just go back to what Bush did and reduce rates to stimulate the economy?
When you say the end of the session, you mean for the summer break, that
Correct.
sort of thing?
Yeah.
No, they're not going to get that done. There's too many special interests. They should just be cutting spending and cutting taxes. And if you can't cut it all at one time, cut something. But no, they want to do the whole package, which I understand. But there's not going to be enough agreement. Everybody has their axe to grind, and it's going to be hard to get them together. And besides, a lot of Republicans aren't dedicated to what I'm talking about. They're dedicated to taking care of their friends. I mean, if you know, take medical care. You know, they have a lot of friends in the insurance industry and the drug industry. They're not liable to change that and cut down real spending. They will do their talking, but debt is big, and when you start cutting back, it's a problem. I mean, it's hard to get an addict off their drugs, and that's what we're trying to do, and that's why it's so difficult for the politicians to come up, because first, I don't think they start with a basic principle that government ought to be very limited and strive for that. They say, well, government, we just need better management, and I don't buy into that. I think we have too much mismanagement.
Congressman, real quick, Heather.
Dr. Paul, the Federal Reserve is set to hike interest rates again this Wednesday, a quarter basis point. And you're talking about our debt levels. What will that effect have on the interest rates to service this debt?
Well, it's going to go up. Supposedly, the market has already discounted that. But no, if they creep up, what would happen if we had a market rate of interest, which is what we need to get an economy to thrive? What if interest rates were 3%? The whole worldwide system would collapse, because everything depends on more and more and more. Now they're tinkering a quarter point here and a quarter point there. They're really not doing a whole lot. So I don't think this is a trend at all. I think this is wishful thinking, and I think that if you go up a little bit more, even this little bit is going to be put a bigger burden on the Treasury. This is where so much production has to go eventually. So with increase in interest rates, and eventually interest rates will go up, and then that will consume all the production.
Congressman,
we cannot pay it.
Congressman,
we cannot pay. We have to print more money.
Yeah, keep printing.
Good to see you. Congressman Ron Paul, take care of yourself.